Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and to another Energon Universe discussion video. We just got another big piece of the Skybound continuity puzzle in the form of Cobra Commander number 1, The Flip Side to Duke. Both titles comprise the current crop of Skybound's miniseries devoted to the G.I. Joe franchise. This issue is a big one because it resolves a lot of the theorizing and online scuttlebutt about the series and Megatron's role in it specifically. I waded in with a video on it in October of last year, and I gotta say, I was pretty wrong on some things. The gist of my theory was that Cobra Commander was working with Megatron, the latter either willingly cooperating or being forced against his will, and that it was Megatron who killed the man Cobra Commander robbed in the preview and opening pages of this book. Obviously, I was off on that second part, plain and simple, but the first part wasn't 100% wrong, but it was executed in a way that I honestly never would have seen coming. And that really comes down to the backstory they decided to use. There's often an air of mystery surrounding Cobra Commander's identity and background, but rather than keep us in suspense and wait until further down the line to reveal the old snake's secrets, Skybound gives us his origin right up front in this first issue. And while Duke number 1 felt like a fresh new take on the character and G.I. Joe as a whole, the Cobra Commander series is much more indebted to previous lore, specifically to that of the 1987 animated movie. There, Cobra Commander's origin and identity were retconned, turning him into a scientist from an ancient civilization known as Cobra-La, hidden beneath the Himalayas after being driven underground during the Ice Age, preceding the ascent of humankind. Cobra-La is a highly advanced civilization, but in an interesting twist, all of their technology is biological and organic. In the Sunbow continuity, Globulus, the leader of Cobra-La, sent Cobra Commander into the world as a harbinger to destabilize human society and make it ripe for conquest by Cobra-La. It's absolutely bonkers, and it's peak G.I. Joe silliness, but I certainly don't hate it. In fact, I quite enjoy it. Maybe it's just the nostalgia talking here, but there's a charm to the 1987 movie that's fueled by the weird and wacky weapons, monsters, vehicles, and just the overall setting of Cobra-La. One of the more beloved cartoons I grew up with was Voltron, and I think some of the stuff in Cobra-La looks like it could have come out of the Voltron universe. It's got that same 80s animation vibe, if you will, so it feels very connected to a specific time and place, both in terms of my childhood and the development of animation. And that's why I enjoy the 1987 G.I. Joe movie despite its numerous faults.
He's gone into a coma.
Still, I never would have expected to see Skybound take us to Cobra-La, and certainly not this early on in their run. It's a bold choice on their part, and considering we see Pythona and Globulus in the very first issue, I think it's safe to say we're going to be in for a wild ride with this one. No Nemesis Enforcer yet though, at least not that I can tell. I've got my eye on this mystery man in disguise traveling with Cobra Commander, but he could just be a royal guard. As far as retreads go, I think this is a successful one, incorporating plenty of nods to the source material while also putting a new spin on it. Rather than being born a denizen of Cobra-La like in the animated film, the dialogue makes it sound like Cobra Commander is just a normal man who was brought to Cobra-La at some point, so you can kind of see it's similar but different. And while he's still disfigured by a spore mishap and sent into the world by Globulus like his cartoon counterpart, these events are tweaked to be more contemporary and to highlight Cobra Commander's new personality. The character himself is arguably the biggest revision here. At the end of the issue, in a brief afterword, Williamson essentially says he doesn't want this version of Cobra Commander to be the buffoon that he was in the cartoon, that he wants him to be dangerous, stating that a rule the creative team set for themselves was that this Cobra Commander would not retreat. And that stuck out to me, considering how often Saturday morning villains of this era would call for a retreat when their half-hour time slot was up. So needless to say, I'm intrigued by the thought of a more deadly Cobra Commander, who paradoxically comes out of one of the most batshit parts of the cartoon lore. I appreciate Williams spelling out his intentions in the afterword, but they're also evident in the book itself, with a moment where we see a Cobra-La scientist, unquestionably modeled on Cobra Commander's unmasked appearance in the flashback during the 1987 animated movie, yelling for a retreat, only to be shot in the head by this universe's Cobra Commander, who says, "No one retreats." The subtext of a new version of a character killing what is essentially an older iteration of himself feels like a grinning and winking acknowledgement of the character's roots while demonstrating how this version will be different. But that's not to say that this Cobra Commander is unrecognizable. He's still scheming and self-aggrandizing, but he's far more of an effective tyrant than he was in the cartoon, turning to violence early and often to make his point and accomplish his goals. His big picture aspirations seem to revolve around the acquisition of Energon and the introduction of new technologies into Cobra-La to produce an army strong enough to conquer not only Earth, but more advanced worlds beyond the stars as well. Naturally, Cobra Commander wants to be the one to lead that army. These ambitions appear to have been provoked by the capture of Megatron. In my video on Transformers number 4, the issue where we get the big reveal of Megatron in the ice, I wondered if we might not be seeing some deceptive time jumping, where Megatron was, at one point, still trapped in the ice, but maybe not necessarily right when the events of Transformers number 4 were unfolding. While it's unclear where exactly Cobra Commander number 1 fits in terms of the overall chronology, I think it's safe to say that Megatron has been in Cobra-La for a relatively decent chunk of time, as references are made to scientists trying and failing to communicate with the Decepticon, ultimately culminating in Cobra Commander figuring out a way to painfully extract the information he seeks. I'm making an assumption here that the study of Megatron allowed Cobra Commander to produce his little Insecticon knockoffs that we see a few times throughout the book. These robotic bugs make a noise that I mistook for being a sound that emulated the transformation sound effect from the G1 cartoon, but I'm guessing that these deadly little terrors were inspired by Megatron in some form or fashion, as Cobra Commander uses them as a sort of pitch demonstration for how to strengthen Cobra-La. Cobra-La itself fits into the Energon Universe nicely, nodding to both the G1 Transformers lore as well as the current status quo of the Sacred Ring in Void Rivals, by producing yet another civilization dealing with a crisis of resources and looming civil war. Details like these help make Cobra-La feel like an actual place with an actual society inhabiting it, more so than in the 1987 animated movie, in my opinion. Visually, Cobra-La looks like a modernized take on the 80s version and almost seems like an alien world unto itself. Series artist Andrea Milana runs Cobra-La through an indie comic filter in this issue, creating a locale and society that's fascinating and intriguing to look at. I'm a big fan of this page, which gives us an idea of what a life-saving surgery entails in Cobra-La, which apparently involves a three-headed snake, or three separate snakes, I'm not sure. Could be either, considering there was a four-headed eel thing in the movie, a jellyfish with a seemingly endless array of tendrils, and a larger luminescent tendril that is maybe functioning as a breathing tube or something else altogether. I don't know. I have no idea what any of this stuff does, but that's what makes it fun. It's weird and kind of gnarly, but very imaginative. Ultimately, the decision to include Cobra-La results in a comic that was stranger and far more colorful than I was expecting. It's the kind of psychedelic sci-fi fantasy setting that you'd expect to see in a space opera set on a strange new planet. So it's pretty bananas that this is still Earth. I actually feel like this was a great choice, as it adds a fantastical element to the planet that, despite being of central importance, is usually the most grounded and, dare I say, boring locale in most planet-hopping Transformers series that I can think of. Adding Cobra-La makes Earth weird and interesting in a way that's on par with Cybertron, Quintessa, and even the Sacred Ring. The Energon Universe definitely got much, much crazier with this issue, and I'm all for it. And the fact that Megatron is in Cobra-La just puts a nice bow on the whole package. Megatron being captured, experimented on, and used to reverse engineer new tech is a well-worn Transformers trope across multiple iterations at this point, but him being imprisoned in Cobra-La makes this familiar device feel fresh and exciting. You could certainly draw comparisons to the '07 live-action movie or Transformers Animated, but to me, this is most reminiscent of the Prime Directive storyline from Dreamwave, only with a much more satisfying human captor and a much more interesting setting. The main point of comparison to Dreamwave here is that it seems like Megatron is biding his time in Cobra-La, much like he was with Lazarus. This panel, where he flashes a smile and his eye glows after Cobra Commander departs for the outside world, says, to me, that the Decepticon leader has his own schemes in the works. As for what those might be, we'll just have to wait until they're revealed in due time. Overall, this was a surprising and exciting read. Cobra Commander's objectives of acquiring Energon and Cybertronian tech seem to put him on a direct collision course with the Transformers side of the Skybound continuity, which adds a whole new dimension to Cobra's mission to conquer the world and could lead to some interesting interactions in the future. And the integration of Cobra-La really helps to give this book a distinct and unique presence in the Energon universe. Really, I can't believe that Megatron is in Globulus's domain, and we're still so early in this continuity. Pretty much right out of the gate, and Skybound is doing Cobra-La. If this is where we're starting from, things can only get stranger and more daring from here on out. Or at least, one can hope. But that's all I've got for this one. What do you think of the inclusion of Cobra-La and this take on Cobra Commander's backstory? Are you excited for some Dreadnoks in the next issue? Leave me a comment, hit the like button as well as the subscribe button if you haven't already. Check out my other videos on the Energon Universe as well as my IDW Comics playlist. Thank you for watching this video. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.